Did you know that in 2010, a massive traffic jam in China lasted for 12 days? Yes, 12 days of people stuck on a highway, moving inches at a time. Some drivers left their cars, others set up makeshift markets, and a few even started living on the road. What started as a simple journey became absolute chaos, all because too many people with different destinations got stuck together. Now let me ask you this. Who are you traveling with? Because the people around you can either lead you forward or keep you stuck in spiritual gridlock. The Bible tells us a fascinating story about a mixed multitude that left Egypt with the Israelites, Exodus 12:38. These were non-Israelites, Egyptians, foreigners, and others who decided to tag along. Some were likely impressed by Israel's God after seeing the plagues, while others may have just wanted to escape Egypt for a fresh start. But here's the question: did they actually belong in the journey? Or did they bring something that caused more harm than good? Let's be real for a second. Have you ever had that one friend who never quite fit into your circle but somehow always showed up? The one who never really understood your values but was always around when things got exciting? That's the mixed multitude. They weren't part of God's covenant, but they were there, influencing the journey. Now, at first, everything seemed fine. The Israelites were free, marching out of Egypt with miracles behind them and the promised land ahead. But then, complaints started. Numbers 11:4 tells us, "The rabble with them began to crave other food, and again the Israelites started wailing and said, 'If only we had meat to eat.'" Did you catch that? The rabble, another word for the mixed multitude, began to complain first. Then the Israelites followed. Suddenly, they weren't grateful for manna anymore. They started reminiscing about Egypt, saying, "We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic." Numbers 11:5. Wait a second, at no cost. Did they forget they were slaves? This is what happens when we allow the wrong influences into our spiritual journey. They start by whispering dissatisfaction, stirring up cravings for what we left behind, until we forget why we even left Egypt in the first place. How many times have we looked back at something toxic in our lives and remembered it as better than it was? Let's take a moment to talk about relationships. In the 1800s, there was a group of explorers called the Donner Party. They set out for California with high hopes, but along the way they made some bad decisions, took some bad advice, and long story short, got stuck in the mountains for months. What happened next? Desperation. Cannibalism. It's one of the darkest stories of American history. Here's the crazy part. There were some people in the group who never should have been there. Greedy guides, reckless travelers, people who didn't know what they were doing but convinced others to follow them. Sound familiar? Who you journey with matters. Think about King Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, yet 1 Kings 11:4 tells us, "As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God." These weren't just any wives. Many came from foreign nations God had warned against. They weren't part of God's covenant, but they were there, influencing his heart little by little. This is what the mixed multitude does. They don't destroy you all at once. They plant seeds of doubt, discontentment, compromise. Now let's take a quick detour to the New Testament. Jesus tells a parable in Matthew 13:24-30 about a farmer who planted good seed. But during the night, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat. The plants grew together, and by the time they realized there were weeds, it was too late to separate them without damaging the wheat. That's exactly what happened to Israel. They let the mixed multitude in, and soon they couldn't tell where the grumbling started. They couldn't separate the influence until it had already done damage. And let's be honest, Sometimes we don't recognize the bad influences in our lives until we're already caught up in the drama. Maybe it's a friend who constantly pulls you into gossip. Maybe it's a relationship that makes you compromise your faith. Maybe it's a habit you picked up from someone else that slowly replaces your hunger for God. So what do we do? How do we handle the mixed multitude in our lives? Evaluate your circle. Proverbs 13:20 says, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." Who are you walking with? Are they pushing you closer to God or pulling you back to Egypt? Guard your heart. Proverbs 4:23, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." The Israelites let complaints in. They let discontentment take root, and it nearly cost them their promise. Set boundaries. Not everyone who starts the journey with you is meant to finish it. Jesus had 12 disciples, but he also had crowds that followed him. Not everyone in the crowd was a true follower. Some were just there for the miracles. Don't mistake proximity for purpose. Stay focused on the promise. The Israelites lost sight of where they were going because they got distracted by who they were traveling with. Keep your eyes on God's promise, not the complaints of those around you. Pray for wisdom. James 1:5 says, "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault." Some people in your life may be weeds, some may be wheat. Pray for discernment to know the difference. Here's my challenge for you. Take a moment this week and write down the people who influence your life the most. Ask yourself, do they push me toward God or do they pull me back toward Egypt? Then make one decision. Maybe it's creating distance from a toxic influence. Maybe it's surrounding yourself with stronger believers. Maybe it's praying for clarity. The Israelites lost years in the wilderness because they let the wrong voices in. Don't let the wrong influences delay your promise. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a mixed multitude experience? Someone or something that led you in the wrong direction? Drop it in the comments. Let's help each other recognize the distractions before they become detours. Like, share, and subscribe, because someone in your life needs this message today.